Welcome to Beyond Coding, a dive into the world of successful people in IT. From your sponsors, Xebia, creating digital leaders. Here's your host, Patrick Akil.
All right. So every consultant that joins our company will get a consultancy training from you, actually.
Yes, they will.
They will. How will that training go?
The training, what it does is for less experienced people, it gives them a bit of a leg up. I mean, it's a short training, right? It used to be a full day, but now with COVID times, it's only half a day. So I kind of try to cram in as much as possible. It's useful.
Yeah.
But it just roughly gives, if you're not experienced, some way of engaging with your customer that's going to make it a better assignment for you. That's roughly what it is. And what I've also found is even people who are experienced in training, that they feel a bit more comfort when they come to Xebia. There's always this question of, I have my style of doing consultancy, but will Xebia be okay with that? Is what I'm doing good? Because of course you want to kind of be a good citizen in a way. And I found that even though they said, well, I didn't learn that much new, there's always some new things to learn with courses like these. But they said, well, mostly I now feel a bit of comfort.
Okay.
The ideas I had about how consulting goes is also, Xebia agrees with me, and therefore I'm going into my new assignment with more confidence.
Yeah.
And so that's what it brings. Normally, so that's the shorter version. The longer version also goes into, because I find that to be a bit of an epidemic of, I could say, our working life, but also not just working life, but in general, is burnouts is a big problem.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I also talk about is like my history of my burnout.
You've
how
had
I experienced
one.
it. Yeah. So in 2011, and I talk about that. How do you recognize it? What are the symptoms? How do we go through it? Like, what's the path through it? For several reasons. One is to make it a discussable option.
Yeah.
That people can talk about it. The second important one is kind of like my way to inoculate the organization. So if you can recognize it in each other, then you can protect each other. Because that's also one of the things I teach about burnouts. If you get a burnout, you never see it coming, which is kind of the point of a burnout. Because if you could have seen it coming, you don't get a burnout because you can basically pull on your own handbrake. So those are some elements that I do during a training. And so it's simply, just kind of like a quick starter kit, basically.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
Yeah. And now it's the shorter version, exactly from from home, I guess.
Yeah, due to what's needed, I have had to leave out the burnout case, like the survival part, simply because there's some very practical things in the normal cases, like, what does being a consultant mean? What does it mean? And the second part is really like a basic level of like engaging with your client. If you have, what's the relationship you have with those? Some very simple practical tips.
Yeah.
What I found because of the feedback is that if you engage kind of from a lower standpoint, that's wrong, because you kind of dive under your customer and then you don't engage at an equal level. They won't respect you as much, so they won't listen to you as much.
Okay.
And it'll take you time before they start listening to you.
Yeah.
You'd like to have that from day one, right? So that's one extreme. And the other one would be if you kind of come from the top down and saying, I'm the expert, I know everything, you're stupid, which is also not a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially in a dangerous case where you might think, they're listening to everything I say. Mm-hmm. But then also it's sometimes the case where the customer puts the responsibility monkey on your shoulder.
Yeah. That's your problem.
Which they shouldn't be doing, right?
Exactly.
It should be at the very least, an equal responsibility. So to also be aware of that mistake. So kind of like, be aware of the fact that can happen.
Yeah.
And another role I like to talk about is the fact that you are a court jester. I use that analogy a lot.
Okay.
Because
what is the court jester?
The fundamental power of having no power.
Really?
That is, you're often not aware of the fact, you say, well, I'm a consultant, I come from outside, I'm not in the management structure, so therefore I have no power. But the very reason that you have a lot of power is because you're not within the power system of your customer.
Ah, okay.
Because you're outside their system, you are also invulnerable to that.
Yeah.
So there's a special kind of power that comes with being invulnerable and free, like a court jester, right? That's basically, they are a crazy person who are seen as, people who are crazy are basically allowed to speak the truth. That's kind of the thing with a court jester, of course. But often as a consultant, you're not aware of that type of unique power that you have. Like often, like simply because we come from the outside, our words have more weight.
Yeah.
But also, very often, you're not afraid to say the things that others are very afraid, because their careers might be into it, or it might be an organization where the bad news messenger basically gets the knife in the back. Well, that's what you're for. That's also one of the things I teach. Basically, if you can make sure in a very good way to communicate that, because they basically cannot really put a knife in your back other than sending you away.
Yeah.
If you do that in a very well-controlled fashion, and of course, it never really happens, but just the fact that you don't have to be afraid for your direct career as you're doing your assignment makes you able to do things that others cannot. Doesn't matter what position you have, even it doesn't matter if you're a programmer or a program manager or some, ad interim director. There's a unique power in that. So, yeah, that's one of those things I teach.
Cool. So it's the burnout, which is not now kind of cut from the consultancy training. Yeah,
it is. As quickly as possible, I'd like to bring it back in, because it's part of the survival track. I think it's one of the big things, I think, and also one of the things I want to help consultants with is how to survive the job. Is in many ways it's emotional, because like if you are an employee of a company, there's a bit of comfort in that. I mean, you've been hired, you do your job, etc. But if you're coming from the outside as a consultant, there's always this thing of like having to prove yourself more. You have to be, the best person in the class, or they're paying a lot of money for you. So there's always going to be that discussion, which leads to pressure. So how to deal with that? How to make sure that you don't burn out? How to make sure that you don't become afraid of things? And it's, I think, one of the biggest analogies I give there is what I call the microwave problem.
Okay.
At least in my experience, is people always blame the outside world. Like, I've been so busy, or that person has been saying bad things about me, or there is so much to do within this assignment. I have so much work. Those are all outside impulses. Yeah. My big lesson was, it's never that kills you. It's the emotional response to it. Right. So it's your reaction. So that's why I call it the microwave problem. So in an analogy of a microwave, so life is the microwaves, your assignment, etc. That's the microwaves going through you. But are you kind of like ceramics that doesn't heat up in a microwave? Yeah. Or are you water? And if you're water, you'll heat up based on this. And so kind of the trick to not surviving a lot of life and a lot of your assignment is basically making sure you're ceramics.
Exactly.
So, and then really having like this mindset of, okay, there's a lot of to do. There's a lot of there's a lot of work to do. It's a very tense situation, etc. But does that mean I need to get emotional over it? Does that really need to be there? That case. And often, like your feelings of guilt, like if you think, well, I'm not doing a good enough job, right? That guilt makes you water. Yeah. Because you feel guilty, and therefore there's an emotional response to things not going well enough, because you feel like, I'm not doing a good enough job. You feel guilty, emotional, and that burns you up. It's
interesting because the people we want have a certain sense of ownership. And because you have that sense of ownership, it makes you want to be involved and actually take ownership of what you're doing as well. But there's a lot of outside factors of which you have no ownership, but which do impact you. Yes. And they probably make you water.
Yeah. And so that's funny that you make like outside factors that you mentioned that. It's I also have this Sergio's golden rule of staying sane is do not worry about the things you do not control, which is an active process. Right? It's that whole thing of I've done my best. I can look myself in the mirror and saying I gave it my best shot. And beyond that, if it's out of my control, I actively have to teach myself not to worry about it too much anymore, because that's, if we're looking at Xebia, for instance, I mean, we basically hire people who are susceptible to burnouts because you are a passionate professional and you really want to be the best, etc. So basically, there's already a lot of emotion and tied into what you do and the way you are. Yeah. So I think that's also one of the things, and the reason I started doing this presentation is because we've had so many burnouts in the past. Specifically for this reason, amongst which my own is that we really, I think, higher than other companies, we have burnouts. Yeah. because of the type of person we hire.
Yeah.
And so
I don't think it's the expectation we put on people.
No.
I think it's the expectation they have of themselves and what they should be doing.
Imposter syndrome is a thing.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
We all have it, right? I mean, I can just talk to any colleague and like, do you have imposter syndrome? Yes, I have. Yeah, like, and it doesn't matter. Like, I've been with the company for 15 years now, and even I have this idea of, you know, am I good enough? You know, or if I want to do like one of our knowledge sessions, you know, you have a subject that you want to talk about. Like always, everybody has this thing like, yeah, but everybody already knows that because everybody, my colleagues are so awesome. They already know this, right? We always have this. And so within a setting like that, of course, it's very, you know, you kind of, do you feel competent enough? Do you feel, you know, good enough? And it's kind of like the trick of letting that go is like one of the big survival techniques. So yeah, I mean, as soon as possible, as soon as like the whole COVID mess is over and we can really do this like again for a full day, that's definitely like the first item that comes back.
Exactly. Yeah.
It just is. So,
yeah. I mean, you mentioned having gone through a burnout yourself as well.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, it basically comes down to those mechanisms. So the year it happened, like when I burned, it was the Christmas of 2010. And the year before I was like totally doing too much. So I was totally overloaded. So I was also trying to get like to become a certified Scrum trainer. So I traveled to different parts of the world to co-train with people. I had a bunch of large assignments. I also was helping organize some of the Scrum gatherings and things like that. So I was extremely busy, and I was also in the evenings. I was always there when we had like an evening thing to do. I was just always there, and this kind of was part of it in the sense of when I say you don't see it coming. I didn't really notice that I was like completely overloading myself. I was basically ignoring my own body. I was ignoring basically the signals that now I recognize for what they are. That's also why I teach, like, you know, when people say, well, didn't you see it coming? And I say, no, but that's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the fundamental things in a burnout is that, yes, you are, and you're overloading yourself emotionally, and you're doing too much, and you're basically burning yourself out, and you're not wise enough to basically listen to yourself. Mm-hmm. And therefore you keep going until truly kind of something breaks.
Yeah.
And that's, so that's what happened before. And anybody who's had a burnout is susceptible to it basically has the same type of story of driving themselves too hard.
Yeah.
And combined with the microwave problem. So kind of with the whole emotional response thing. And then just, you know, at some point, just something breaks and you go.
What happens when that breaks, basically?
I think if I also look at the past, like my recovery period, I think the first quarter, because funnily enough, it was like not just funnily enough, there was a reason, but I can get into that later. It was like an exact year.
Yeah.
Exact year.
Of recovery, you mean?
Yeah, the recovery. So let's say the Christmas and the first quarter was basically symptomatic of the period you're in there. Like when you're in a full burnout, you actually have physical problems. Like that's like you're in a medical case in the sense that people are truly that deep need medication.
Yeah.
I didn't want it because I'm also like a doctor's kid. So I was like, nah, I don't need no stinking medicine, etc. And weirdly enough, I'm an agile consultant. And as an agile consultant, I always feel that you need like the true feedback.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it was, no, I don't want to have medicines that are going to dampen the feedback I'm getting from my body. So I wanted to go through the whole thing. I know it's weird, but it's just the way I thought.
Yeah, because the medicine,
it basically helps you through that period. But and of course, and it was in that sense doable. But the point is that it's very close to kind of like a physical overload. And also I have that in my presentation. It's kind of like 4 levels that I identified because, of course, we're developers and so I, of course, analyzed stages and kind of I've made a whole like model. I've modeled everything in my head. I know it's just weird. That's the way we do. That's I guess the way we IT guys do it, right? And so the heaviest stage is like what I call stage 4. That's overload. Basically, your body shuts down.
Yeah,
it just says overload. You pull the handbrake, and to the extent that your body protects itself and your mind protects itself, and just says like total shutdown, and you're lying in your bed and you can't even like raise your arms. Kind of like just you're sitting there. You're just totally tired. Another thing was, and that's like stage 3 is called overdrive. I call that overdrive.
Yeah,
is where body kind of goes into a fight or flight mode. So somewhere around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I would be like really tired. I mean, it's like having what's the Pfeiffer's disease, right? When you get very tired, it's similar to that in the way it exposes itself. It's of course not the same disease, but I was like super tired and I had no energy whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my body would go like run, right? It would like have this thing of I need to do things. So my heart would start beating quicker again. Yeah, it would like be really, really fast, and then so I couldn't sleep. So your body is basically going into overdrive, refusing to let you sleep. Yeah, and it's kind of so that was also a thing. And so the shutdown, like stage 4, was really basically the body going like, this is going way too far. Let's just completely shut down. And I've had also other people who talked about it, is that they just sit in front of a window, just stare out the window, like mind's just completely shut down. They're not there anymore.
Interesting.
So those are really some extreme cases, right? Yeah. So for me, like that was about 1/4 of a year, like 3 months. And that's really, and other parts of that is like it's one of the things also when I draw it, I draw 2 circles. One is, actually I throw 3 circles, like a 50% smaller one, a 100%, which is a bigger one around it, and then 200% or beyond, like big around that. Yeah. And I use that to show that one that happens is your energy level goes from 100% to 50%. Yeah. And the second thing that happens is that it, instead of having a buffer, and that's what I use the 200% big circle for, which you don't notice normally, is that when you have energy, you go through that buffer in a big way. Like you stay up late, things like that. You eat basically into your buffer. Yeah. You don't even notice you have it. But you do that. So you have 200% of energy, and you're eating into your buffer all the time, and you go to sleep and you recuperate, and no problem. But when you get into this situation, basically both your total level of energy goes down to 50%, and it becomes a brick wall. So the moment you do anything that is too tiring, you basically smack.
You shut down.
Like it's basically brick wall. You get totally tired. You can't do anything anymore. So just for my recovery, at some point, I was here in Hilversum at one of those places where you can take walks. And at some point, I was taking a walk, and I got so tired I couldn't walk anymore. I just had to sit down.
Was it at that point where you went like?
No, that was already in my recovery period. So I had to stay. I stayed in like Xebi has a house, and it's just to kind of for me to be in a place by myself, just with nothing
secluded
around. So they let me stay in that. It was really nice there. So I just did my own thing. But I also took a walk, and then I had to sit down. I couldn't move anymore. Just
tiredness.
Yeah, it's just you're completely tired. And the moment you become tired, you can become like really tired. So it's just totally game over. Yeah. So that's kind of the first quarter has kind of that medical feel to it, right? Yeah. It's really in a medical sense. And of course you get like from the bedrijfsarts, they help you out, and they basically talk with you about, what's your recovery period going to be. One thing I also forgot to mention is in that same sense as the personal energy, there's also the emotional energy, where normally you have a similar type of buffer to emotional response. Like, when we make a joke and I make a joke that's not it's a little joke, right? You make you talk something, haha, glasses or something like. Normally, nobody would ever care, or if people would make a joke about my glasses, I would never I would laugh with them, right?
Sure, you'd brush it off.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. But then in a situation like that, you have also no emotional buffer anymore. So everybody just comes in like a hammer.
Really?
And
so every little joke would impact you.
Yeah, or every remark, or every little thing, or also my father had a similar situation. I still remember him being in the same situation. He was actually the one in Christmas when I was reading my breakdown. He said to me, "You have a burnout." He recognized it. Yeah, because he had it himself. And I still remember when he was at some point doing his bread. He was making his bread. And he cried. He was standing there crying because he couldn't choose between cheese or ham.
Okay.
Like the
complete breakdown.
The emotional load, which is slight, of choosing between one or the other, and the implications that might have, was already too difficult. Yeah. It's stuff like that. Or I still it's so funny. I still have to laugh. Even in the moment it happened, it was funny. There is on the Netherlands in the radio too, there was this late night program called Candlelight, where this guy with this very low voice, he reads very bad poetry that people send in, right? Yeah. It's, if you normally listen to this, you're laughing your head off because it's just very bad, but it's really funny.
It's good bad poetry.
It's very good bad poetry. But then of course I couldn't sleep. So I was listening to it. I was crying.
Really?
Yeah, because the emotional impact it was real, like bullshit poetry.
Yeah.
But there was some
but you
emotion.
Felt it
completely. And at the same time, so I was crying. And I also was laughing at that moment because I was like, this is stupid. This is so
all
funny.
Emotions.
Yeah, because it was so funny. That it was, I in observing myself, it was really funny. So again, kind of that's all those things that happen in the beginning. It's also if you recognize somebody who has a burnout, generally they'll have a completely over to the top response to something normal. That they get angry over something where you go like, this makes no sense whatsoever. Why are you so angry about this? This should be. That's one of those big things you could recognize somebody in a burnout, because that emotional like overload is just, or the buffer is just completely gone.
Yeah. So for you, it was your dad that pointed out.
Yep.
To you that you had a burnout.
Yeah.
And after that you sought help.
Yeah. So I called, I said, I have a burnout, I'm out of it. And then of course, then of course in a normal like company setting, you go to the bedrijfsarts, and I don't know what the English translation is, but basically the company doctor. And then they also analyze you. They say, okay, yes or no, and they help you out. And then basically there's a whole recovery plan. Now, what was interesting to me is that normally that would be the case, what was actually the case of like way back when, they would keep you home for the full period, and then at some point you would start working again. That is actually a very bad idea.
So it's from full working to completely shut down at home.
Yeah,
and then at one point you would go back into a full work week again.
That's the way they used to do it. Okay. So, for instance, you would be home for a full year.
Yeah.
Problem is, there is an analogy to an atrophying work muscle in the sense of your ability to work.
Yeah.
If you stay home for the full year, it's like, I would imagine like somebody in a wheelchair, right? You're sitting in a wheelchair and your legs get really skinny because you never use your legs, or somebody who's in space, right?
Yeah.
Your muscles atrophy because you don't use them. It's similar to that. So the problem was that at that point, the way they treated burnouts at that point was that then a lot of people couldn't start working again. So they were out of work forever. Mm-hmm. They couldn't work anymore. So what they do nowadays is as quickly as possible, they start you working, but in very little increments.
And what does as quickly as possible mean? Or is that
in my case, it was
person?
After 3 months.
Yeah.
So it was, I started for 2 hours per week, or 2 times 2 hours per week.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, really small. It's just getting kind of going through the motions, not the difficult stuff, just simple things.
Yeah.
And kind of that builds up. And that's kind of the thing you talk about when you're talking with that doctor, is that basically negotiate with you how far you're along your journey and how far can you scale it up now. So you go to half a day a week, and two half days a week, etc. And at some point you kind of get into this area of doing a full work week, but then only half days. And and then you scale up until 100% again. So kind of slowly you build until you're at 100, back at 100%.
Yeah.
And that full recovery period for me was a year. Well, basically 3 quarters.
Yeah.
From that, and then at that point, I still remember because Daan, our CEO, who at that point said, "Serge, do you realize if you're out of in the ziektewet, what's that thing called, when you're by law going through the insurance for being sick, you're not fully working, your salary from the law kind of goes back to 70% if you're out for a full year."
Yeah.
So for me, there was kind of a jumping point I had to make. Like, okay, do I now make the step and start working fully 100% again? And so I was close, but I still remember that I was a bit afraid.
Yeah.
So, but it did help me. I mean, it did help me just make that last step. But your recovery isn't done then, because I was then working full time.
Yeah.
The beginning period, I was tired. After every single working day, I would be completely floored.
Yeah. Did you go into work with the same vigor as you had before the burnout?
There were some
careful.
There are some differences, yes, I think, but they're in a good way, because there's also, I've seen also discussed this with my father, there's also a lasting impact. Like if you used to have 100% of energy, you end up after a burnout, there's lasting damage. There's maybe 80-90% of what you used to have left.
Like a battery.
Yeah. But however, what I've also noticed is you've become wiser in using the energy that you do have. So I've noticed that I have become more effective. So basically my output went maybe to 120, 150, because I was more effective at managing the energy, holding back at the right moments, but also saying no, right?
Yeah.
So that's also one of those things, like, saying no at the right moment, and not promising things you cannot promise. This was one of my big problems as well. Just saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
And then recovering that. So that's also why I'm answering it in this way. It's not so much that you have the same energy, but you use it more effectively.
Yeah.
So it's a yes and no. It's both.
Exactly.
Right? Both yes and no. And so when I recovered, it was the full 100%. And then first it was like tired every day. Then it was tired the whole weekend. So I would basically have to sleep the whole weekend. And then there was a point down the line where you notice, oh, that's not happening anymore. Basically, I can recover out of a normal working week, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
And then the buffer goes further and further. So where I couldn't, like, I love playing like computer games at night, right? So in the evening it's like quiet time, everybody's asleep, and then I game.
Yeah.
And so basically there's a stupid part of going to bed a lot later, right? Maybe 2:00 in the evening or 2:00 in the night. And I couldn't do that in the beginning. So other part of my recovery was me finding out I could do the stupid stuff again.
Exactly.
Right? So that whole period is an extra 2 to 3 years. So basically from I'm working 100% to I can again do the stupid stuff.
Yeah.
That's about 2 3. So if you're like from the first moment you crash until you basically can say, okay, I'm basically back to where I was before the crash.
Yeah.
That's about for people who go really deep, about a 2 to 3 year period.
That is a long period, way
It
longer
is.
than I expected.
Yeah, but with the caveat, of course, like I was already kind of doing work from like half year, right? It's not that I was completely doing nothing. But yeah, I mean, and that's also one of the reasons I think I find it so important to talk about this, and also to inoculate everybody else from getting into it, because I mean, you're looking at a 2 to 3 year recovery, full recovery. So who do you want? You want nobody to have that, right?
Exactly.
And so I'd rather teach people to recognize the signs beforehand and be a bit wiser, and not having to go through the experience, but kind of basically already have the wisdom to pull on their own handbrake before that happens.
Yeah.
And so
prevention is easier than actually going through it and recovering.
Yeah,
I could imagine.
Definitely.
And you laid out the 4 stages of a burnout.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the four levels were for me kind of like the warning signs levels.
Yeah.
So it was the full shutdown, it was the overload, and then phase 2 is what I call the clench. So it's something I've actually heard with many people at a burnout, is that they around the sternum area, the muscles between your ribs, they can clench, and that's also what I've heard with a lot of people at burnout, that they have a feeling that they cannot breathe anymore.
Okay,
it's because of that.
Yeah,
it's because of that. It's not actually true, but it feels like that. It feels you can't breathe because of that clenching feeling around your sternum.
Yeah, your chest clenches, and you kind of have is it a shortness of breath, or is it kind of reaching for breath?
It's a reaching for breath thing. Yeah. So it feels like you have difficulty breathing because of that reason. It's something I don't have that often, but I've also seen other people, because in that sense everybody's experience is unique.
Yeah.
To name that as their main like body signal. Like, oh, this is happening, this is my signal. In my case, I have this weird thing where on the tops of my arms and on my legs, there is this kind of weird like itchy feeling that I get, which is my phase 1.
Yeah.
So I can already feel if there's like a level of tiredness, I get that feeling in my arms and legs, and I know that something is going on. So I've learned to recognize, and that's actually one of the parts I also think is very important in like full recovery, is to know your own body and what are the signals your body gives you in these stages. It's different for everybody. I can talk about mine, and maybe people can have them in a different order or have something completely different. That's also why I talked about the clenching thing. For other people, it's their number 1.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, it's kind of like a stage 2 thing. The overdrive, I've also heard that often. And so in my case, that's like a stage beyond. And I think I've had in all these times, I think I've had stage 3, maybe one or twice in now, what are we talking about? 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And I've actually recently had stage 4 for a very short while, I think 2 days.
Okay.
And that was really like a big wake up call. Like, okay, wait a minute, I went way too far. So I really, I took days off and really made sure that I rested well, etc. And then I recovered pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I think one of the important things is, and also that's also why one of the best people to help you out with recognizing the burnout is somebody who had it before.
Interesting. Yeah. So, but what you mentioned is some aspects of the phases you laid out, someone else would be able to see that, for example, that you're going too hard or working too long or not taking the rest.
My experience is also, and that's also been very nice with when I've done the training, that there's always somebody who comes out and says, oh, I've had that personally, or I know somebody, or my partner has it, or has had it, or
so in around their circle, there has been an experience like that.
And in this thing, experience is pretty important, because I've found that the best people to help you with that is always the people who have had it or have experience with it, or have a close relative or their partner who's had it. And they can also always speak from experience. Those people are actually pretty valuable, because those are also the people who will more easily recognize it than others.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, I can talk about it until I'm blue in the face, but in the end, I mean, until you've experienced it or seen it, then that's actually the best proof, or how you say, the best way to learn it.
Yeah,
or learn about it.
What was interesting to me is that you said, well, now I recognize it earlier, and I recognize the phases in myself as well.
Yeah,
I think stepping back and reflecting on how your week went or how your day went is pretty important for both mental well-being and physical well-being. Do you do that more often now?
The funny thing is that I'm really a pretty, I don't know, very, very Dutch in the sense that I'm really not a guy for like mumbo jumbo is a weird word. It doesn't do justice to a thing, but like kind of like the soft things like meditation and things like, it's really not for me. I'm very like, I may be an emotional person, but in other things I'm very rational. So for me, it just doesn't work for me. So I'm not saying that it's correct that I don't do that, but I simply don't.
Okay. What do you do then? Do you have something that you do? Because at some point you do realize, okay, this is me going a bit too far.
Yeah, simply because it just it's in a way it's something you don't even think about. You just know, right? Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know, when you step on something and it hurts, your foot hurts because of it. I mean, you simply know. I mean, you don't need to think about it. It's kind of like that. I mean, it's something I don't need to think, or I don't need to actively go through a process of maybe meditation or reflection.
Yeah,
I can trust myself, my body or whatever, to simply signal, and I will recognize the signals. I know that.
Yeah.
So I don't need to. That's also one of the things that's nice. I don't need to worry about it. I don't in that sense.
That's good,
because I basically know my protective mechanism is basically working all the time without me saying, okay, I need to do some reflective work or something like that.
Yeah, but you do listen very carefully to your body then, and to the symptoms, I guess.
Yeah, but that's also kind of an automatic thing. I mean, anybody, for instance, like maybe this is like a sidestep, but like if you're a parent, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I've also noticed that there's a thing I would call the daddy radar, or a parent radar. Like, of course, me being a dad, there's always this thing when you, especially for your very small kids, right? You need to be on, the radar needs to be on all the time, because they can walk up to something, put something up their nose. I mean, if they're very small, they're scared that they're rolling off the bed, things like that. So the radar is on all the time. That's only, you realize that the radar has been on all the time when, for instance, I don't know, your kid is with your partner and you can go out do something else, or you're having a weekend together with your partner, and the kid is with the grandparents.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you notice that there's this freedom in your, there's this pressure.
Less weight on your shoulders.
There's like, when you didn't notice the daddy radar was on all the time.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean in this sense as well, is that kind of, that awareness is on all the time. It actually doesn't really cost energy, like in the analogy with the kid, but it's just there. So do I reflect? Not really. But there are cases where I think what for me, for instance, was a very useful exercise is when you shower or like things like that, or when you're in water, at least in my case, I really actively try to, because that's the moment when, especially if you're like in the IT field and you're an abstract thinker, you tend to kind of go outside your body and think like these big abstract thoughts or stories, or you're thinking about programming or concepts or whatever. You're out there, but you're not like in your own body.
Yeah, but this is when you're showering. So these are all shower thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, shower,
toilet.
No, not toilet, but it's really like the moments you should actually be zoning out, right?
Yeah.
That's like, for me, it's like shower, bath, things like that, like, or even sauna, or kind of the moments you should be zoning out. I've really taught myself to sometimes, and that's an exercise I actually do, is where I try to notice everything actively in my body. Like, for instance, like for me, the shower is very useful there because the water kind of going across your body, kind of sensing that. If you're in an abstract mode out there in space somewhere, you don't notice that happening.
Yeah.
But it kind of really actually, okay, the water's going across my hand, the water's going across my arm, it's going like things
it's
like that.
Feeling what's happening to your body.
That's the moment you're really in your body, like you're really there.
Yeah.
And that also helps you keep grounded.
Interesting.
And that's a better moment for you to feel how you feel than if you're outside in the abstract world, right? And me being like a sci-fi geek, I tend to kind of, for me, like when I'm in a shower, like science fiction stories happen in my head.
Really?
I'm not at home at all.
Yeah.
Like that's just like, I don't know how many books I've already written in my head out of the shower, but that's kind of where I am. But I really have noticed that, am I stressed or not? How do I feel? Yeah, that's really, that kind of comes with that exercise, simply doing the exercise of being in your body. And then go like, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually pretty stressed out.
Yeah.
So or maybe in hindsight, I should correct myself. Yeah, there is one exercise.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the shower thoughts. I recognize that. My girlfriend says I shower way too long, but I lose. My mind goes everywhere. Yeah. Basically, I lose myself in there.
Yeah. It's out in space. I don't know. Cool. I'm never in the shower really when I'm in the shower.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I love that you are willing and open to share about your burnout stories to help others. Because the sole purpose is to share that experience and help others prevent that.
And I, in a way, also have a bit of a mission to... I've found that in a lot of people I talk about it, there's a level of shame attached to it, or that it's it's a taboo subject. I've never felt that ever. So having discovered that, and people, oh, it's so good that you do it. I was like, well, I don't know, it's talking about having had a flu, right?
Yeah.
What's the end? You've been sick. Are you guilty about having the flu?
Yeah.
That's weird. So for me, it was so in discovering that, I was like, okay, if I can help people in talking about it, then it works. And to the extent even I've put it on my resume.
Nice.
So I've put the full burnout year is in my resume.
Yeah.
Like normally, right, when you put your resume, you go like, okay, I was at this company and I did this and this and this, and these were my achievements.
Yeah.
So I've put my achievements in my burnout period. So in the sense that I've become more mentally resilient. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, mentally resilient, things like that. So those are the things I learned from that period.
Yeah,
so
beautiful.
And the funny thing is that sometimes you see people who actually then read the resume and go like, oh, it's so good that you do it. It's so brave. And I was like, well, yeah, but that's actually what I learned in this period.
Exactly. I mean, some people are an open book and you can ask them any question and they'll talk about it. Yeah. And some people are a bit more private.
Yeah. And so that's also, in that sense, I have that mission to as much as I can get it is to make sure that it's not a taboo subject.
Yeah.
Because it is an epidemic. I mean, let's face it. I mean, the mental pressures that we have are pretty high nowadays. And I feel if there's one thing that people tend to kind of go down on, or like when they fall on their face and they cannot work anymore. So many people have a burnout.
Yeah.
And I've actually, in telling these stories, there's many people who then contacted me and talked about it. And I've actually heard, therefore, people telling me stories. And they said, yeah. It was like I was at my workplace and there was this manager who didn't understand me and he thought I was a loser. Kind of like, then it becomes like associated with, oh, you're not strong enough, you're a loser. And and that even makes the problem worse, right? Because you feel guilty.
Exactly.
Which makes you water in the microwave. And boom, there you go. So
what should you do when you're in a position like that? Like you feel your chest clenching, for example, a reach of breath. Is it taking a step back, going on a vacation, kind of recharging your batteries? What would you do? What would you advise?
Well, the funny thing is that in going back to my point when they say, but didn't you see it coming? And I say, yes, that's the point. The very fact that somebody notices of themselves it's happening is already the biggest thing.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is 80% of the solution. Simply recognizing that it's happening.
Yeah.
Now about what to do. I think if you're very far down the line, it's making sure that, so mentally inside your head, it's asking yourself the question, but do I really need to, emotionally respond to this? Do I really need to be angry about this? Yeah, sure. The project is going, really badly. But does it really mean, do I really need to feel guilty about this? Do I really need to feel angry about this? It's kind of like very like a stoicism thing, right? It is, or maybe also with some, I think even Buddhism has things like that. I think somebody told me about that. Definitely not an expert on these subjects, but
sure.
The kind of disconnecting the action and the reaction.
Yeah.
And that's the first part of it. And the reason I'm prefacing it with the other one is going to a place where there is no emotional inputs to you anymore. Like when you can, you have quiet time and because yes, that is part of the solution, but it's only the symptoms.
Yeah.
Because saying there's no input anymore, it's also what I also did in the beginning, because I didn't realize really what's going on. Because what I'm saying is all hindsight, right? What I'm teaching you now is something I only really figured out somewhere almost a year down the line.
Exactly.
So I didn't realize all those things in the beginning. So in disconnecting, so if you say, oh, but I have to step outside of my work environment, you're basically saying the inputs that I have, the microwaves coming at me, I'm going to step out of the microwave. But that's just dealing with the symptom of the fact that there's these microwaves happening and you're stepping out of it. The fundamental problem of you being water is still there.
Yeah.
So that's why there is a two-step thing you have to do. Yes, one, just for the short term, just to protect yourself.
Is get out of that situation.
Get out of the situation. That's one. That's a way to do it. But the more powerful one is kind of going from this water back into ceramic mode, basically.
Yeah.
And saying, but do I need to emotionally respond? Which is the real fix.
Yeah. That's the mental resilience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the big one. So you could even, if it works for you, keep working, but then do the mental trick.
Yeah.
And the mental trick should be the true trick. But of course, in many cases, I mean, you're already burned out a bit and you're further down the line. Yeah, of course, it's a bit wise to just, take time off, step away, etc. And allow yourself to do so, right? I mean, of course, that's one of the big ones is, do you, how guilty do you feel when you say, it's been too much for me, I have to step back a bit, I have to take a week off or something like that? I mean, that's also a big part of this.
Yeah. So for me, what I'm missing still is, so I now know what the symptoms are and how a person can help themselves.
Yeah.
But how can I, from an outside perspective, help someone that I think is going through those stages?
I think we already touched on it for one of them at least. I think the biggest one is a completely overloaded emotional response. I mean, one where you go like, this makes no sense.
Yeah, but that's a symptom.
That's a symptom, yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about how I could help, for example, someone else in my circle.
Oh yeah, so in the recovery sense.
Yeah.
I think one of the things is just not loading on the guilt in a way, right? In the sense of, being supportive, saying, because anything that you can do, especially if people are far down, right? They anything that kind of could lead to an emotional response, even the positive ones, right? I mean, people would start crying over the fact that you're helping them and they're happy about that. And then because they have no buffer, they immediately start crying happy tears.
Yeah.
Right. So, which is, I mean, in a way that's fine. But I think make sure that to allow people who are in that stage, give them room and freedom, give them quiet, don't overload them with anything. For instance, like if you normally WhatsApp them, the fact that they don't respond will be normally, looking at WhatsApp will trigger a lot of emotional response because there's things that they say, etc. So very likely it's just, leaving them alone in the sense of giving them space. Still giving them some signal of I'm here thinking of, I'm here for you. If whenever you want to contact me, by all means do so, and then leave it up to them to respond or not.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the best thing to do. If you're in a work situation, like somebody's like going down, then one of the most important things is to simply tell them what's happening. This is what I observe on you. You are now going in this. I see now that you are completely overloaded. Do you actually notice what's going on with you? That's actually giving them feedback that they're ignoring of themselves is another big one, I would say, especially in the prevention. So I have multiple cases that I had a colleague and was going like, "This is happening with you. Do you realize that?"
Yeah.
And they were like, "Yeah, is that the case? Yeah. You're actually kind of completely over emotional."
Yeah. So it's pushing that self-reflection kind of on them.
Yeah.
Putting it out there.
Yeah.
And having them realize that.
So helping them see, and then I've had various responses like, "No, I already know." Could be. The other one was, we kind of like, "Oh yeah, thanks. I didn't know that." So kind of they go into kind of a thinking mode and go like, "Okay." And of course, there's always the response, yeah, I get it, or thank you for the information, but I'm still continuing.
Yeah,
because there's always the case where people, and there's definitely cases, and sometimes you cannot stop it, where people simply have to go through the burnout period because they have a personality type that they'll just drive themselves over the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
that is hard.
There's no other way than sometimes also in that sense, I mean, there's from the other side, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
So if you give somebody feedback and they still drive themselves off the cliff, you did your best. I've also seen some people who simply, and I guess I would include myself in that list, who had to go through the experience to truly learn the lesson.
Yeah.
Which is, too bad. It takes you 2 years, but...
I mean, it's a wise lesson on the long run.
I must say, I mean, also, like in my management phase that I did at XSD was, I couldn't have done it without the experience.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had the emotional resilience for it. I'm very sure of that.
To manage people, you mean?
To deal with the emotional response.
To deal with the emotional response.
Because what makes a management job difficult is not directly the amount of hours you put in.
Okay.
It's the constant pressure. Of responsibility. Because you're not responsible for your own performance.
Yeah.
You're responsible and worried about the whole group.
Yeah.
Everybody. And you're responsible for and having a role in like the total system. And of course, in a setting like ours where you have all these consultants who have their own opinions and always overthinking, it's very like, for instance, like being a programmer in that sense is very nice. If you press an A, A will show up on the screen. It
exactly.
will. And of course, in the wider sense, I mean, we all get angry at the software. Like, why aren't you doing this? That's of course there's a level of non-control, but still, the level of control you have as a programmer over the thing you're doing, the work you're doing, is so much higher than when you're dealing with people. Because basically, you can often only suggest things, or
there's a lot more variables,
a lot more things not going your way, group dynamics.
Do you think that's what makes a good manager then as well? That certain level of mental resilience?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
If you see people like our colleagues and managers who then don't make it is a big word, but then don't want to do the job anymore or whatever. Big part of that is because that mental resilience. It's in the sense of like running a marathon, they can't handle the marathon anymore. In that sense, it's definitely not for everybody, right? Like in that sense, maybe being a manager is kind of like a combination of that type of mental resilience, to have a level of organizational skills, to really make sure that shit happens and gets organized, and the I's get dotted and the T's get dashed, like things like that. Things get finished, and I think the other big one would be the inspirational side.
Yeah,
being the voice or the representation of the whole group, and I talk in that sense a lot about like esprit de corps, like what the Marines have, like they talk about esprit de corps and that thing.
Yeah,
is to have a group that feels proud that you're together, right? And if you do something for the group, it's also because you think that makes the group better, and my contribution to the group will actually amount to something. It'll be useful. It will make us better together, and I'm proud of who we are.
Yeah.
That also takes, from a leadership perspective, is that the group feels like a group. And that contributions are actually, they help building up something. Also, and especially in larger organizations, I had so many times where like higher level leadership basically breaks the group apart again. And then you get into the situation where you go like, well, I can invest in this group, but it'll be broken apart anyway. Why should I do that?
Yeah.
So, and I think in a big part, that's the third thing as a leader. You represent the...
It's a certain level of visionary, I guess.
Especially in our organization, like in Xebia, it's. I think there is a subtle caveat to that, is that you shouldn't be the visionary. You should make sure that whoever has the best vision
gets empowered,
gets the voice, the best vision wins, whatever. That's more the case. So a lot of it is more what I call passion farming. I've also talked about that in other things, is that you make sure what everybody's good at, and then figuring out, oh, you're good at that.
Yeah.
That's your thing. Let me start, helping you and taking away roadblocks. It's a very classic way of thinking about management, when you saying, oh, it has to be my idea, or I'm the boss, or it has to be under my control, or etc. That would definitely not be my style. My style is very much, I'm stupid asshole. I don't know. I have bright ideas on my field of work, and I'll definitely not shy away from voicing those opinions. But a lot of other stuff, I don't know. You tell me. And if I have an idea, you have an idea, and I am your manager, by definition, we're going to do yours, because that'll be motivating to you.
Yeah, interesting. I think a lot of people don't see that, and they are managed, and they have certain expectancies of management, and they want to do well for their manager.
Yeah.
Even though they might be micromanaged to some point.
Yeah.
They want to meet the expectations.
Big problem. Micromanagement is one of the big problems. Is not knowing how to lead. Is because you came from the job that you were, raised up from, and then people start basically, if you are a programmer in my team and I used to be a programmer, then I start talking about like telling you how to do the programming, which is basically me doing my old job.
Yeah.
Whereas what I should be doing is looking at a higher level and saying, what's the goal we are achieving? So basically my arrow I'm looking at should be basically in the horizontal direction, in the sense of I'm looking forward to, at my level, like the bigger goals that we need to do, etc. Instead of pointing that arrow of focus downwards to you, and saying you need to be doing that work. And that's also a big thing. And in that sense, I learned a lot about from Scrum and Agile. The product owner role is basically that type of leadership that says, this is the direction, this is the ordering, like this is the high things we do. You are the team, you're the experts, go fix.
Yeah, it's a certain level of trust that you put on the team.
That too.
And then everyone can do their own respective thing.
Yeah, and clarity of direction and things like that. So those are all very important things. And I'm definitely not, I don't consider myself to be, the way I describe myself is I'm the best and the worst manager at the same time, mostly worst.
Interesting.
I definitely have some qualities. If I looked at my management period, I'm proud of some things, but I wouldn't call myself a manager in the sense that there is a level of organizational skills needed that I don't have.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not the person, like if you need to organize like a party or some event or in it, I can do it.
Sure.
But it takes me an immense amount of energy and time and focus, which takes away from all the other stuff.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons why you stepped down from management? That realization of organizational skills?
Well, funny enough, that goes into details of like the specific situation in Xebia itself. It's still the case that if there would be some management job that opens up and people say, well, we need somebody who can fill it in for a while. Yeah, sure. I'm not afraid. I'll do it. I do feel confident in that sense. But I'm also kind of a weird profile because I'm definitely not a standard manager. And I think that if you're looking at somebody who's a professional manager, like, we have some people working around now who have much more professional profile. There's a level of organizational skills, etc., and organizing things and making sure basically that the ship is calm, right? Kind of like that level that is that I think is very important, especially if an organization grows larger, to make sure that things just go smoothly and things like that, which I think is much more important than the type of leadership I would bring. Is much more the crazy visionary, let's do cool stuff, kind of the that type of leadership, which has its value.
Yeah.
but it's more without that other type. Yeah.
You need a yin and a yang.
Yeah, that's definitely a bit of yin, and that's kind of like, and many people are a combination. I tend to be at the extreme end.
Sure.
So I might have my positives, but then there's so much negatives connected to it that I do not consider myself for that reason a manager. However, I have the experience, and I think in the sense of like advice to others, I definitely think it's good to have some of that experience. Because, for instance, if you're doing a job and you're working with managers a lot, oh my God, does it help that you have the experience?
Yeah.
Oh yes, it does. Nowadays,
in discussions or
discussions, advice, connecting, empathy, knowing what they are worried about. I didn't really get them.
Okay.
That was like I think I didn't. But also, if others know that you have the experience, they will also talk to you. You know how it is, right? A manager will much more
equal level of communication.
Yes, it will be. That's in that. So in that sense, it's been an immense help. So in that sense, I've become a lot more effective in my consultancy, because at some point, if you're an experienced consultant, you're respected for what you can do.
Yeah.
But more like a hitman in the sense of like that's your area of expertise. That's what you know. I'll respect you for that little thing, but I'm not going to put you at my level.
Sure.
Like that manager will not say, okay, you're kind of like talk buddy with you, you know how it is, etc.
Yeah. You're not one of.
Yeah, you're not one of, and that has been the difference definitely for me. So yeah.
What are some of the common worries of a manager? You mentioned that before as well, that you understand their worries.
I think the nature of the work. I think one of the first big lessons is that, comparing it to a consultant's or a professional's work, you have to focus. I would say it's like one very big ball you're running down. Like it's one very big assignment. However varied you think your work is, it's still one big assignment in the end. It's one system you're creating. There's one clear thing. The problem with a manager's job is you're juggling 50 balls at the same time.
Yeah.
And you never chose any one of them, because you're basically the garbage can for everything else. And especially if if you have trouble juggling more balls at the same time, if you have trouble like keeping your agenda in order, that's a weakness.
That's where the organizational skills come in.
Yeah, definitely. So that's, I think, one of the worries. The other one is business implications of things. Like, for instance, when I say to you like 70K, is that a lot of money?
No clue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I had no clue. And that's also when I got a presentation from a manager and they gave numbers like this is 100K, 70K. I also told them like, please give me some baseline for that.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean? What does 70K be? Now, one of the things I can tell you now is that, for instance, the 70K number in my head is what I've learned is that if you add a new employee to the group, roughly speaking, you can count on making 70K more profit.
Interesting.
Just that fact alone. So there's some numbers that nowadays are in my head where I know, because therefore I can put economical numbers in context.
Yeah.
Or for instance, there's on the whole spreadsheet, and you see on the balance there is gross revenue, and under that's cost of sales, and it says 12K.
Yeah.
What does it mean? Is that a lot? Is that not a lot? Right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I've learned, cost of sales is something that kind of gets subtracted from your net profit. It's the costs you make to make your revenue. So it's not like normal cost, which you subtract. But so there's all kinds of reasons you do this, but it's a thing. And so why is there a minus on the plus side of your spreadsheet?
Sure.
It's that. Is 12K a lot? No. So I've also learned if you do hiring, and you have a company that you pay to bring in people, that's about the money you pay. So you have to expect if they bring on like one or two consultants, you're talking about 12K or so of money that you're buying for that,
and it's worth it.
Yeah, generally because of the 70K, right?
Yeah.
So you see kind of where these things.
Yeah, the baselines make sense then.
Yeah, and so. And that's maybe a bit of a very detailed discussion, but kind of fundamentally grokking how the business system works.
Yeah.
Right? So that was for me a big lesson, and the worry about it, the responsibility you feel, because in the end the buck stops with you, right? Everybody else can say, okay, we have a problem, but in the end, I've done my best in my job, I've done the best consultancy I can do, and now I can go home.
Yeah.
As a manager, you don't have an excuse. You have to worry about it because that's what you're for.
Yeah.
So that's the emotional overload, and that's what they're worried about all the time. It's things like that. Also, what I also thought was interesting was the sales side.
Mm-hmm.
The realization that, like, what's the nature of sales? Whenever you had a sales training, have you ever had a sales training?
Never.
Never. So one of the things I noticed is that they also talk about the sales talk, right? The pitch, or you get a training and then you get this trainer in front of you, and then you have to kind of pitch something. And
I've heard that, but I don't have a baseline for it. What does that mean?
The funny thing is, what I realized is that that's only 10% of sales. The way you get taught it is like as if that's the thing, like that sales pitch. And it turns out to be not important at all, because 90% is networking. Truly, like good salespeople, if you look at them, they're constantly busy with their network. Constantly, who do I know? Do I know them? Can I call somebody, etc.? Like our good salespeople are always talking about, oh, I saw that guy at that company and he switched to that company. They're constantly managing their network, looking at like the soft links they have with all those people. So very good salespeople actually come with a very good network. And when I learned that, when I see Dan, at some point we did the business training, and then at some point he just offhand he says, well, you have to do this thing, and you just take a list of 20 names and you start calling them, and that was like the thing I was struggling with. So Dan, stop. I said, that's the whole point here. You just like that, you say, and I have a list of 20 people. Where did you get that list?
Exactly.
I have no clue. Yeah. I'm really struggling there to figure out. And he was looking at me like, and he didn't realize he's so experienced there. He doesn't even think about it anymore.
Yeah.
So that was another lesson of the fundamental nature of what is sales is networking.
And how do you build up that network then? Is it going to a lot of conferences and talking to a lot of people and being that social?
Look at a sales guy. Look how they work. You see them constantly talking to people, going out. It's not about the sale they're going to do today, but the connections they build up for later, and constantly talking and seeing if they're getting some connection over there. So that's the nature of how sales works. And so understanding that, and understanding that that's like one of a fundamental truth in sales, and knowing that, and if some like a manager you talk to, kind of understands, he gets that, you become one of them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's in everything I've learned, like some of these like lessons around management have been very enlightening.
Yeah. Well, one question that comes up in me is, so if you go back to the start of, let's say, an organization, it starts with one person or a few people, and at some point they are going to manage other people. But when should you make that step and say, well, you're now a manager, you're going to manage a group? Because I've heard some people have managers and those managers manage 2 people or 3 people, which is incredibly odd to me, at least.
Oh, I can pretty much predict where that happens. That happens in the period when you have an organization where status is a thing.
Yeah.
Right. If you're in an organization where status is how many people do you have under you, you will have that. So it's also, how does the organization deal with status? What brings you status? Is it because I have so many people under me? Yeah, you'll get 2 people managers automatically. Here in Xebia, we have a 1 in 10 ratio. That's like the base rule. Doesn't matter what the role is, because we need 10 consultants to carry one supporting role. Be it the manager, be it a salesperson, etc. So that's what it's just, for us, it's just an economic number, nothing else. The span of control for what we call then the span of control, in the sense of like, if you're a manager, how many people do you have, really comes down to a combination of the nature of the role and human communication. So if you look at a classic team lead, who is, let's say, HR line management responsible, but also classically is the person who says, this is what we do, you do this now, like, old-fashioned hierarchical management.
Exactly.
You might, if you're lucky, end up somewhere between 1 to 5 and 1 to 10, right? Because it's simply so much work for that manager to do in team lead, and putting his claws in everything, the classic team lead. Yeah, that's about the span you can have. Now, but if you're like what you see in an agile fashion, is that a lot of the operational responsibility is not for a manager anymore, because that's kind of ingrained in, you have a product owner, you have a scrum master, etc. So a lot of the old responsibilities basically get delegated into the team somewhere else.
Yeah.
So the role itself becomes lighter. For instance, you can focus more on the HR side, more on people skills, things like that, which means you can have a discussion with more people.
Yeah.
So the span is wider. So then you maybe can deal with 40 people.
Yeah.
Because you simply have time for it.
Yeah.
So I think when managers happen, it's when managers happen, it's kind of when those ratios start showing up. Anything else than that, I think really modern organizations, if they're really working with agile teams, so much can be handled within the team context. You need a lot less managers than you used to. I mean, a lot less.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess thinking about it, I mean, the ratio I see with us in Xebia, it tends to be like 1 in 40 or so.
Yeah.
And I think it's mostly the human factor. If I look at Xebia experience, is that it also, for a group to feel like a group, I've seen many cases where like this 40-45 magic boundary happens, it grows larger, and then somehow kind of the team feeling breaks.
Interesting.
I've seen it also I've seen it happen as well. Like, it became too large. Somehow this team thing breaks, and then there are some options that you have. The positive one is basically their cell division.
Yeah.
So for some reason, I don't know, 10 people carve out and they become GDD, and then some other people carve out and they become bigs, and they become like one of the other subunits, and they're like a new growth core, a new growth kernel, and then they grow out from that. That would be a positive one. And so, in our case, if we look at our organization, it's kind of the 40 people mark. That's kind of like apparently this magic boundary. And I think it's also one of the big questions is, will we ever be able to have bigger groups than that? I don't know. I guess that's the experiment we'll have to do.
That's a maybe.
Mostly because we've only recently started to hire truly professional managers. We don't have them that long.
Yeah.
We don't have, I think we currently have 3, where we had 0 3 years ago.
Interesting.
The ones I would consider, those are professional managers.
Yeah. They know how to manage beyond a certain reach, what we had before.
To really consider management as a skill set and a job to be learned.
Yeah.
To have their full focus on it. To really fully focus on people skills. To fully focus on making sure the machine works. Whereas until now, most of us were either salespeople or weird guys like me who kind of, somehow grew into the role and shit happened. And we didn't really have like full pure managers in that professional level. I think people have now I really respect. And to me, that's going to be interesting to also watch. Like, does that mean that the span of people you can have in a group becomes larger as well? I don't know.
Yeah. We'll see what it holds.
I don't know. But since we're also growing as an organization, I'm very curious to see if that happens. My feeling is no, actually.
Interesting.
That's my hypothesis. I think that 45 person marker, I have a feeling it's a universal truth.
Yeah.
But I don't have the data for it. So I'm open to
find out. And I guess we will. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on, Serge.
Yeah.
Had a lot of fun talking to you.
Yeah, it kind of went all over the place, didn't it?
I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah. Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
Okay, bye-bye.
Beyond Coding. From your sponsors, Xebia, creating digital leaders.